Hello, my name is Juan Hermosillo, and today we'll be looking at cognitive development theory and zone of proximal development. So, for cognitive development theory, what it is, it's a theory created by a psychologist named Jean Piaget, and what he explained it as is a relationship between cognitive development and a child's interactions with their environment. So essentially, he didn't view intelligence as some kind of like fixed trait, but rather he saw it as a result, something that came as a result of a child's interactions with its environment. And so that brings us to the definition of genetic epistemology, right? It was the study of the theory of knowledge, and that's kind of what Jean Piaget classified his work as, is genetic epistemology, right? And so the very like fundamental, right, the building blocks of Jean Piaget's cognitive development theory is schemas, right? And what exactly these schemas are is they're a way of organizing knowledge in such a way that a person will be able to utilize them to draw assumptions about new stimuli, right? So the best way to put this is for my SpongeBob fans out there, right? There's an episode of SpongeBob where SpongeBob needs to recall fine dining from his memory, right? And so in a little cutscene, you see a bunch of little SpongeBobs running around in his head, right? Searching through file cabinets, looking for, the file of fine dining. And essentially that those are schemas. Looking through your mind for that, file, we'll call it, right? That will allow you to draw a conclusion of whatever it is that you're experiencing in your life, right? So those are schemas. And how those kind of play a role into the development of knowledge or learning is we can look at those in these next steps that we've got here. So assimilation and accommodation, right? So these were the two aspects of building new knowledge, right? Applying these schemas and how they affect new knowledge. So the definition for assimilation is applying schema that are already familiar to new stimuli to understand them. So essentially taking what you know and trying to make sense of what you don't know based on what you know, if that makes sense. And then there's accommodation. So when a new schema must be created to deal with the situation because existing schema can't answer the problem, right? So it's you're going to run into stuff that your existing schemas, right, or your files in your head that won't be able to answer your new questions. And so in order to answer, get the answer that you're looking for, you need to accommodate and create those new schemas. And essentially that brings us to equilibration, right? So we're kind of looking for that sense of equilibrium, right? You got to accommodate and kind of get back to knowing, you know, where you're at. So by definition, equilibration is when assimilation fails, it throws the person out of equilibrium, and through accommodation, the person can create a new schema for the new situation, right? So you're thrown out of whack, you're able to accommodate, and you're back into equilibrium. That's the act of that is equilibration, right? And so what Jean Piaget did is he was able to classify by age group certain levels of development that could be expected, right? And we'll go through these right now. So the stages of development, right, as he has defined them, is they're there to categorize the level of development that a child's thought processes go through as they age, right? So the first one being sensory motor stage. When a child is 0 to 2 years old, they learn to talk about objects and create mental notes about them, right? Particularly object permanence is huge in this stage, right? You see an object like a baby, right? You're playing peekaboo, you're hiding, and to them they can't see your face anymore. You're gone, right? And so in this somewhere between these ages, they're able to finally put the like pieces to the puzzle together. We're like, I know you're still behind those hands, right? So that's sensory motor stage. Then moving along to pre-operational stage, which ranges from 2 to 7 years, is it discusses how a child's thought is egocentric and that they're capable of thinking in symbols, right? So a child's thoughts being egocentric is essentially just them not really able to take in opinions of others and use those opinions to, influence their own thoughts. It's really just like these are my thoughts, like, And in terms of thinking in symbols, they just kind of make connections with what they see and what they can expect. Like, if they see a water bottle, they can draw an assumption that there's probably water in there and they can drink it. Um, a concrete Moving on to the concrete operational stage, which is from 7 to 11 years old. Um, in this stage, a child begins to become capable of solving questions in their own heads, right? So they don't necessarily need to go out and do things like physically to find the answer that they're looking for. They're able to, think about it, right? They have that sense of cognition now, and they can just do it in their head. And for the last stage that Jean Piaget talked about was formal operational stage, and that's from 11 years and on. And from this stage on, children are able to fully apply their knowledge and think objectively, right? Test their hypotheses, all that good stuff. They can really just, they're able to apply what they know effectively. And lastly, kind of relating, to that formal operational stage, is discovery learning. And all really discovery learning is, it's the idea that children learn most effectively by discovering things on their own and by doing them. So kind of going back to, where they're doing they can apply their knowledge to test their hypotheses, to, just test anything really, and they can apply their knowledge and discover things on their own. And so that's that for our cognitive development theory by Jean Piaget. And moving on, next we've got, oops, let me zoom out just a bit. Too much. All right. We've got our zone of proximal development. Let me just zoom in just a smudge. There we go. We'll just leave it. Okay, so zone of proximal development. Right. So developed by another great psychologist, Mr. Lev Vygotsky. What he explained, the zone of proximal development, or ZPD for short, is he defined it as the distance between what someone is capable of performing under the guidance of someone knowledgeable and what they are capable of performing on their own. So to really just, in layman's terms, what this really means is, I'll give you guys an example better. It's, I'm sure people have experienced, when you're in class as a student and, the material just seems really easy, right? Piece of cake. And then you get home and you look at your homework and it's nothing like what you expected. You're looking at the questions like it's a complete different language, you know what I mean? So that's kind of what he was saying about the zone of proximal development. It's that, I want to say that kind of like that rebound, I guess you would call it, right? Because you're doing so well with the guidance of your whoever's helping you, but then once you're on your own, it kind of like, oh no, like, you kind of draw them back a little bit. You gotta work a little harder to understand. So that takes us back, or that brings us to the line of natural regression, right? And that's essentially describing what we are talking about here now. So the line of natural regression is essentially, you've come so far with your educator and you just come back once you're kind of set free, the reins are cut and you're on your own. That's the line of natural regression. All right. And how do we aid this? How do we, have a student not come, how do we lessen the zone of, how do we lessen the line of natural regression? And number one, right, cultural tools. These are the tools that are available to better appeal to the student and aid in learning. And realistically, it's just all the tools that you can use as an educator to appeal to a student, right? Number one example I can think of currently is TikTok, right? You make some kind of TikTok dance and you've got student engagement 100%, right? And that's what we want. So moving along, we've got scaffolding, right? And essentially, you think of a building, you think of the scaffolding, right? Next layer's done, they remove the scaffolding, and then you keep going, and that's essentially what we're doing as a teacher, right? So scaffolding here in the zone of proximal development can be seen as a learner, or by definition, right? A learner is only capable of completing so much on their own, but with some assistance, they're able to complete far more and in a much shorter time, right? And that's going back to like the line of natural regression, right? We're trying to lessen that. So effective scaffolding, right? How do we do this effectively? How do we effectively help them, but without over helping them, right? So this is done in order to ensure that scaffolding is effective. It must engage the learners, simplify the task, place emphasis on the correct steps, and ensure that the learner remains calm, right? You don't want to overwhelm them. You don't want to have them get distracted. You want to ensure that your support is not going unnoticed, right? And so furthering, right, effective scaffolding, what we can do is build knowledge through social interaction. And by definition, that's the encouragement of learners to further their learning by collaborating with their peers, right? So I mean, if you've been in class, right, I'm sure you've done group projects and stuff like that, and that's essentially what it is. You're trying to foster this sense of community within the classroom, right? And in doing so, you're encouraging collaboration, and by encouraging collaboration, there's more support, being there, as opposed to just you as a teacher, right? Maybe another student can be that guidance, for a kid doing homework, right? So branching out from this social interaction, right, we've got two things. The first one is collaborative learning. And so in group discussions, there will be students at different levels of understanding of the material. The more advanced students will be able to assist those that are less advanced. So again, right, kind of like what I was just talking about, is where in groups there might be a student that's more advanced that might be able to better assist the student or further assist, right, than you can as a teacher. So collaborative learning. And then moving on to reciprocal teaching. The teacher becomes involved in the collaboration among the students to aid in the practice of summarizing, questioning, clarifying, and predicting, right? And so basically you're throwing yourself in the mix, right? You're in the group projects, or the not necessarily in them, but kind of popping in, seeing how things are going, and slowly kind of checking out, giving them their space so that they can do it on their own. And that's how you utilize the knowledge through social interactions. And one thing, another part of the scaffolding, right, the support for these students, is you are, or other students can be a more knowledgeable other. And what that is you're the person that is knowledgeable of the subject that is attempting to assist a learner to accomplish a goal, right? So I mean, easiest example is a teacher, right? You're here to help a student learn, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a teacher, right? You could think of it in the aspect of a coach. A coach is trying to help an athlete get better. Your peers, right? Your peers can help you better understand your homework. It doesn't necessarily have to be an educator. It's just someone that's more knowledgeable, right? So more knowledgeable other. And that is what we've got for zone of proximal development. So thank you guys for tuning in with me, and hopefully you guys learned something. Take care. Bye.